The ride home from the graduation ceremony was quiet, but not in a tense way, more like a sacred silence. Amelia leaned her head on Austin's shoulder in the back seat of the car. Their fingers were laced, warm and steady between them. The sun was setting over the hills, casting a golden hue that seemed to kiss the edges of everything it touched. When they reached the estate, Grace was already waiting at the front steps, holding 2 glasses of sparkling lemonade. She handed them off with a grin and said, "Nothing, just a wink." Before slipping inside, Amelia kicked off her heels and walked barefoot across the marble floor, her gown trailing behind her. Austin followed, loosening his tie, his eyes never leaving her. They didn't speak until they reached the master balcony, where city lights blinked in the distance like scattered stars. "I still feel like I'm dreaming," Amelia whispered, holding the cool glass to her cheek. Austin turned to her, resting one hand on the railing and the other lightly at her waist. "It's real," he said softly. "You did this." She looked up at him, her lashes heavy with emotion. "We did." He leaned in, kissed her temple. "You earned every piece of this. The degree, the applause, the respect. The way my father looked at you today." She smiled faintly, recalling the proud nod Austin Sr. had given her after the ceremony, like she wasn't just welcome, but belonged. "I never thought I'd be this person," she said. "Standing here, with you, with them, being seen." Austin turned her gently to face him. "You didn't become someone new, Mia. You returned to who you've always been. They're just finally seeing clearly." Her eyes welled up, and she rested her forehead against his chest. "I used to dream about a life like this when I was little," she murmured. "But I never thought I'd live it. And not like this, with love. With peace." He pressed his lips to her crown and held her there. "And now?" he asked. She looked up, eyes full of wonder and fire. "Now I want more. Not things, meaning. I want to build something, give other girls what I never had. Safety, opportunity, choice." Austin smiled, that rare, tender smile that still unraveled her. "Then we'll do it," he said. "You lead. I'll follow." They stayed on the balcony until the moon was high, the sky soft with starlight and the hum of cicadas below. Later that night, as they lay tangled in linen sheets, Amelia traced the scar on Austin's forearm with the tip of her finger. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she whispered. He nodded. "Every damn day, even with everything. It was all worth it." He turned to her fully then, cupping her face, his eyes darker now, steady. "I'd walk through every storm again if it led me back to this moment. Back to you." She smiled and kissed him, slow and deepful of the promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Just before they drifted off to sleep, Austin murmured into the dark, "There's something I've been working on. Surprise. But it's not ready yet." Amelia shifted. "Another house." He chuckled. "Something bigger." She looked at him curiously, eyes half-lidded. "Bigger than this?" He paused. "I'm starting a foundation," he said quietly. "In your name?" Her breath caught. "For girls like you, smart, overlooked, caged by circumstance. It'll fund education, legal aid, housing. You'll run it. If you want to." She blinked, tears welling again. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. It's time we turned our story into something that outlives us." And in the silence that followed, Amelia knew this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a legacy. The foundation launch came 3 months later. Amelia stood at the edge of the rooftop garden that overlooked the heart of the city, a place that once felt too large for her dreams, now pulsing with the rhythm of her purpose. The banner behind her bore its name in elegant gold script. The Arise Foundation, advocating rise, integrity, safety, and empowerment. People were arriving: lawyers, social workers, educators, women from shelters, government partners, and a few discreet members of Austin's network. But Amelia's eyes were on the front row, where 4 young girls sat in matching Navy uniforms, nervously clutching the folders they'd been given. The first recipients. The beginning. Grace handed her a microphone and whispered, "It's time, Amelia." Exhaled, smoothing her blazer. Then she stepped forward. 3 years ago, I stood outside a law firm with calloused hands. A resume soaked in rain and a name no one remembered. I had no connections, no safety net. Just a dream I buried under other people's expectations. The crowd stilled. I didn't need saving. I needed a chance. A door. Someone who looked at me and saw not where I came from, but who I could become. She glanced toward Austin, who stood in the back, hands in his pockets, watching her. She hung the moon. This foundation is that door. For every girl who's been told she's too loud, too poor, too broken. We're here to say you are enough, and your story isn't over. The applause came slowly, then rose like a wave. After the ceremony, one of the girls approached her. She looked about 16 with tight braids and wary eyes. "Miss Amelia, is it okay if I ask you something?" "Of course." The girl hesitated. "Were you ever scared? Like when it all started?" Amelia crouched to her level and nodded. "Terrified." "What did you do?" "I chose to move anyway." The girl's lips twitched like she might cry. She nodded once, then walked away with a steadier spine. Later that evening, back at the estate, Amelia stood barefoot in the kitchen, her blazer replaced by a soft robe. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Austin, who leaned on the counter watching her with that look again. "You were brilliant today," he said. She smiled. "I felt like I was standing on holy ground." "You were," he said simply. Then he pulled a velvet box from his jacket pocket. Her eyes widened. "Austin," he opened it, revealing a gold ring knot with a diamond, but with a single deep sapphire, surrounded by tiny stars engraved in the band. "I know we already promised each other everything," he said, "but I want the world too. No contracts, no business arrangements. It's just us. Real, permanent." Amelia blinked fast, then reached for him. "I don't need a stage or a guest list," she said. "Just you," he murmured. "Just this." She agreed, and as he slid the ring onto her finger, she realized something she hadn't said aloud yet. She was free. But more than that, she was home. The wedding was quiet, intimate. No press. No spectacle. Just a vineyard outside the city, where time moved slower and the breeze carried wild lavender. Grace stood beside Amelia, adjusting the veil that shimmered like morning dew. "You ready?" Amelia nodded, but her voice was soft. "It feels different." This time, Grace arched a brow. "Cold feet." "No." Amelia smiled. "This time, it's not about escaping something. It's about walking toward something. Someone." When the doors opened, Amelia stepped into sunlight. Her dress was simple, elegant soft silk with a trail of hand-stitched pearls. Austin stood at the altar, wearing no tie, just a crisp shirt with sleeves rolled slightly, as if to say, "I am myself with you," as she walked toward him every moment. They had survived flashed like a silent real rooftop nights. Hushed arguments, the contract, the kiss in the hallway, her breaking. His staying, when she reached him, neither spoke. He just took her hands and held them like something sacred. The officiant began, but the words blurred. What mattered was the vows they'd written themselves. Austin's voice was low but clear. "I've seen power, Amelia. I've tasted ambition, wealth, fear, but none of it taught me what you did. You taught me to stand still, to choose truth over image, to choose love even when it's terrifying. So I choose you now, not to fix you or protect you, but to walk with you, always." Amelia's voice trembled. "I spent years being invisible, quiet, useful. I gave my light away to people who never looked me in the eye. But you," she looked up at him, tears glinting, "you never flinched when I burned. You let me rise. So I promise you this, I won't shrink in this love. I'll meet you with fire, and I'll stay." They exchanged rings, no applause. Just silence and wind, and then his forehead rested gently against hers as the officiant whispered, "You may kiss," but he already had. A quiet kiss. One that said finally, one that said forever. That night, under stars and soft jazz, they danced on the grass barefoot, a circle of lanterns flickering around them. Grace stole a photo. Sienna cried. Mrs. Vexler smiled from a distance, finally seeing not a merger, but a marriage. After everyone had gone, Austin and Amelia sat on a bench wrapped in one blanket, wine glasses forgotten beside them. "I don't want to disappear into luxury," she whispered. "Want to stay grounded." He nodded. "Then we build a life that breathes. Not a palace, just a home." They clinked their glasses once, then leaned into the silence of their choosing. The contract had ended, but the story had only just begun. It started with a letter, unmarked, hand-delivered, left at the Arise Foundation's front desk and a plain cream envelope. Amelia opened it slowly, standing in her office. The paper inside was thick, the handwriting almost too neat. "Carrie? A name you do not know, but your mother did before she disappeared." -D. Amelia froze. She read it again, and again, no address. No contact. Just a single letter and the tremble it left in her chest. That night, she didn't mention it to Austin. Not out of fear, but because she needed to breathe through it first. To remember who she was now before reopening the wounds of then. Instead, she drove alone to the house she grew up in, the one buried in a forgotten part of town. Shuttered windows, rusted gate. Weeds climbing the porch like memories that refused to die. She hadn't been here in over 10 years. Inside, it smelled like dust and secrets. The floor creaked in familiar patterns. In the bedroom, she found the box her mother had kept under the bed. It was still there. Inside, a faded photograph of a woman in a hospital, uniform Amelia's mother. Beside her, a man with sharp cheekbones and unreadable eyes. On the back of the photo, 2E with "Love Always, Darius." Her pulse quickened. Darius, the signature on the letter. She didn't recognize the man in the photo. But something in his eyes. It felt like looking into a mirror from a life she'd forgotten. She took the photo, closed the box, and walked outside to call Grace. "I need you to dig into something," she said, discreetly. "The name is Darius. Possibly connected to my mother before she vanished. Medical field, maybe. Possibly criminal records and Grace. Yes, if this is what I think it is. I don't want Austin involved. Not yet." Grace hesitated, but her voice was steady. Understood. Back at the estate, Austin noticed the distance. "You okay?" he asked, arms around her waist as she stood by the window, silent. She turned to him and smiled. "I'm learning too. Be okay, even when everything feels uncertain." He searched her face. "Are we uncertain?" "No," she said gently, brushing his cheek. "We're the only thing I'm sure of." Still, when she lay beside him that night, her mind wasn't in the sheets or the softness of his touch. It was with the photograph under her pillow. The next morning, Grace called. "I found him. Darius Okoye, former surgeon, suspended license, multiple clinic violations. He was your mother's attending physician the year she disappeared?" Amelia's breath caught. "And now, he runs an unregistered health shelter in the outskirts of the city, off the books. It's barely traceable." "But Amelia..." "What? It's listed as the emergency contact for you. Has been for years." Amelia stared at the phone. The world didn't spin. Sharpened. And with calm resolve, she whispered to herself, "Then it's time to meet the ghost." The shelter was hidden behind a faded mechanic shop, past the edge of the city where streetlights gave way to dust and wire fences. Amelia stepped out of the car alone. The photograph tucked inside her coat pocket. A volunteer opened the door for her, eyeing her tailored jacket and hesitant posture. "I'm here to see Darius Okoye," she said quietly. The woman hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Amelia replied. "But he'll see me." Something in her voice, not arrogance, but certainty, made the volunteer nod and disappear into the hallway. Minutes later, he appeared. Darius Okoye, older now, hair graying at the temples, a limp in his left leg. But his eyes were sharp, and when they met hers, the air changed. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just stood there, staring at her like she was a ghost he wasn't sure was real. Amelia stepped forward. "Slowly, you know who I am," she said. He exhaled. "You look like her, my mother." He nodded once, but didn't soften. "Elaine, you were her doctor." "I was more than that," he said. "But you already know that, don't you?" She pulled the photograph from her pocket and held it out. "You were listed as my emergency contact. Why?" Darius didn't reach for the photo. His hands trembled at his sides. "Because she asked me to," he said quietly. "Before she disappeared, Elaine came to me, scared she had found something she wasn't supposed to. In the hospital records, in the foundation's donors. She knew too much. And then she vanished." Amelia blinked. "You think she was?" "Silenced? I think she tried to protect you." His voice cracked just slightly. "And I think I failed both of you." Silence fell between them. Dust hung in the air like suspended time. "Why didn't you come for me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I was warned," he said, "told to stay away. And when I finally tried, you were already in the Wexler system. With them. Too protected. Or too dangerous to approach. I watched from a distance. Made sure your name stayed out of certain files. I signed that contract to stay silent. But I never stopped looking." She studied him. His guilt was real. "But so was her ache. You're not my father," she said. "No." He shook his head slowly. "But I loved your mother. That I would have. Raised you as my own." Amelia looked away, her throat thick. "I have a husband now," she whispered. "A name. A future. I came here. Not for answers. But because I needed to decide whether this part of my story still had power over me." Darius stepped forward then, carefully, like approaching a wounded bird. "And what did you decide?" She looked him in the eye. "That I'll write my own." Ending, later that night, Amelia sat in the dark by the window of their bedroom, holding the photograph again. Austin stirred in bed. "You're thinking loud," he murmured. She turned to him, finally ready. "Austin, I need to tell you about Darius." His eyes opened fully, and she told him everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When she finished, he stood, walked to her, and knelt at her feet. "You didn't owe me that," he said, "but I'm glad you trusted me." She touched his hair, her fingers trembling. "I don't want my past to define our future," she said. "It won't," he promised. "But if it ever tries to, we'll face it together." And for the first time in weeks, Amelia finally felt free. Not because the past had been solved, but because she no longer had to carry it alone. The next morning, Amelia stood before the full-length mirror, her hand resting over her abdomen. Light was soft, golden, spilling in through the gauzy curtains. Austin came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "You slept," he whispered, kissing her temple. For once, she murmured back, "I feel lighter." I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, holding on to the silence. Then her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. A message from Grace. "Mrs. Wexler, we have a problem. There's someone here asking questions about your mother. Says he's a journalist and he's brought photos." Amelia's breath hitched. Austin caught the shift in her expression. "What is it?" She showed him the message. His expression hardened instantly. "Want me to handle it?" "No," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I need to." At the foundation, Grace met her in the hallway with a tight, unreadable expression. "He's waiting in the conference room. Says his name is Jonah Cale. Freelance British accent. Very persistent." Amelia nodded and walked in. The man looked up, mid-30s. Sharp cheekbones, disheveled curls, and a file resting on the table in front of him. "You're Mrs. Wexler." "I am." "Jonah Cale, investigative reporting." "Don't worry. I'm not here to smear your name. Quite the opposite. Sit and sit." "Then what are you here for?" He opened the file. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, hospital staff directories. Then a photograph Amelia had never seen before. Her mother, younger, smiling, standing beside a man whose face had been circled in red ink. "This," Jonah said, tapping the man's face, "is Dr. Lionel Grieve. He ran the oncology research department at the time your mother disappeared. He also received heavy donations from an anonymous trust, one that, oddly enough, links back to Vexler Pharmaceuticals." Amelia's heart sank. She had heard the name Grieve before, briefly, in an old annual report her mother had filed. Right before she vanished, Jonah continued, his voice low, urgent. "I think your mother uncovered something. Trial results being falsified. Patient consent forms destroyed. And I believe her disappearance is connected to it." Amelia finally sat. "You want me to do what? Open an investigation? Speak out publicly? Risk the board's wrath? My family's name? No," Jonah said. "I want you to help me finish what your mother started. Quietly, carefully. I believe she left clues. You're the only one who can connect them." Amelia stared down at the photograph. Her mother's eyes, fierce, full of quiet determination, stared back. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about justice. That night, she told Austin everything. Again, he didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for her hand and said, "Then let's burn down the lies, together." The next morning, Amelia sat in her study, the old Foundation archive spread out across her desk. Austin entered quietly, placing a cup of tea beside her. "You've been up since dawn? Couldn't sleep?" Her fingers hovered over a yellowed folder labeled Patient Trials -2009. "There's something here, Austin. My mother knew it. She left this behind for a reason." Austin sat across from her, eyes steady. "Then we follow the trail." But not alone. As if on cue, Grace entered, holding a secured laptop and a slim silver flash drive. "Jonah sent this last night? Said it's the whistleblower interview your mother recorded weeks before she disappeared." Amelia's heart clenched. They connected the drive. The screen flickered to life. A grainy video. A hospital break room. Her mother, younger, visibly tense, sat across from a woman in scrubs. The woman's voice was shaken. They altered the numbers. Patients were dying, and they hid it. "Dr. Grieve told me to stay quiet, or I'd be blacklisted. I tried to go to the board, but they erased my badge entry logs. Said I never even worked there." Amelia's mother leaned forward, voice steady. "I'll protect you. I'll get this out. Even if it costs me." The video cut. Silence filled the room. Austin whispered. She knew she'd be silenced. Amelia looked at Grace. "I need every record my mother touched. Every copy she made, even drafts." Grace nodded and left. Amelia turned to Austin. "If I push this, the Vexler name could fall. I could lose everything. You could lose everything." Austin reached for her hand, his voice firm. "I didn't fall in love with your name, Amelia. I fell in love with your fire," she exhaled. Nodding, then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." Austin saw it too. His jaw clenched. Amelia's eyes hardened. She stood, walking toward the window overlooking the city. "No," she said, "I won't be afraid." Later that night, Jonah met them at a hidden cafe on the edge of town. Dim lights, no cameras, just hushed urgency. "I traced the anonymous trust to a shell company in Zurich," he said. "Guess whose name is on the board? Robert Vexler." Austin froze. "My uncle." Amelia's voice was cold. "He knew." Jonah nodded. "Your mother must have been getting too close. That's why she vanished. And now you're next." Amelia didn't blink. "Then let's finish this," she said. "Let's uncover every name, every lie, and let the truth ruin them." Jonah handed her a final file. "This is the list of people tied to the shell company." Amelia opened it, and There at the top was the name of the current chairman of the Wexler board, the man who had hugged her at her wedding, the man who had called her daughter. Austin whispered, "My father." Amelia's breath hitched. The folders slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor with a soft thud. The name stared back at her like a wound. Gregory Wexler. Her father-in-law. The man who had toasted at her wedding with teary eyes, who had welcomed her into the family like a daughter, who had kissed her cheek and said, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to Austin?" She looked up at Austin. He was still pale, as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "There has to be a mistake. My father, he wouldn't." But the evidence was irrefutable. Jonah, voice low, broke the silence. "He was on the board the year the trials were hidden, the year your mother disappeared. His signature is on the disbursement that funded the shell company." Austin slowly sank into the chair, his hand covering his mouth. Amelia's voice came. Out horse, he helped cover up the deaths. He silenced whistleblowers. He threatened my mother. And now he's threatening me. "I'll confront him," Austin said suddenly, standing. "Tonight." No, Amelia's tone was sharper. Then she intended. "You're his son. He'll twist it. We need more proof. More eyes. If we go now, he'll shut everything down before we can move." Jonah nodded. "We leak this to the right people. Let the pressure mount." Amelia stepped away from the desk, the weight of everything pressing down on her. "Then we take down the board. All of them. Not just my father-in-law. Not just Grieve. All the men who buried those lives." Us. Looked up at her, eyes heavy but full of fire. "And what about us?" Amelia turned to him, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "We survive this. Not because we're untouched, but because we choose to face the storm together." A beat. Then he stepped forward, pulled her into his arms, and whispered, "I'm with you, Amelia, even if it all burns down." 3 weeks later, a news article exploded across every media outlet. Whistleblower documents reveal Wexler Foundation tied to patient trial cover-up names on the board. Implicated in decade-long silence. Photographs, redacted reports, the old video dot, and a single name highlighted as the source of the leak. Dr. Amelia Ray Vex, lead dot. The world now knew. The board convened in emergency. The press swarmed. Stock prices dipped. Gregory Wexler issued a public statement claiming ignorance. But behind closed doors he called his son. Austin didn't answer. But the next morning, a formal letter was delivered to Amelia and Austin's apartment. "You have embarrassed this family. You've made enemies you can't imagine. This isn't over." Gregory Wexler. Amelia stared at it for a long moment before tearing it in two and tossing it into the fireplace. She turned to Austin. "Let him watch what rebuilding with truth looks like." The fire crackled as the letter curled into ash. Amelia didn't flinch. Her hand was steady, her face unreadable. Austin stood behind her in silence, watching the flames reflect in her eyes. "He's not going to let this go," he said finally. "I'm counting on that." She replied quietly. Days later, courtroom lobby thought. Grand courtroom echoed with reporters' murmurs and shuffling papers. A class action suit had formed. Patients, families, and medical staff who had once been silenced now stood with her. Amelia sat beside Jonah, her notes clutched tightly in her lap. She wore no jewelry, no heels, no glossed veneer. Just a plain black dress, a braid pinned low at her neck, and eyes that had learned not to blink when stared at. Across the room, Gregory Wexler entered with his lawyers in tow. His face was hard, pale, but when his eyes landed on Amelia, he hesitated. She didn't look away. Austin entered minutes later and sat beside her, his fingers lacing with hers silently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For not choosing safety?" He looked at her jaw tight. "I didn't fall in love with a safe woman. I fell in love with you. Testimony de Amelia took the stand. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the whole country waited outside. She spoke slowly, calmly, clearly, she told them. About her mother's work, about the buried research, about the missing patients. The name changes, the threatening emails, and finally, about the man who funded the silencing campaign. My father-in-law once told me that sacrifice was necessary to build something great. She said, but what is greatness if it's built on the backs of the unheard? I'm not here to bury a man. I'm here to lift up every voice that was ignored for years. Grigori's lawyer objected. Overruled, she continued, I married into power. But I do not serve it. I serve truth. And if that means losing everything, I accept it, because I refuse to build my life on silence. When she stepped down from the stand, the room was dead quiet, until a woman in the back whispered, that was my son. Another voice, my sister. Then a slow clap. Then more, until the whole gallery rose in applause. Weeks later, verdict. Delivered. Gregory was found guilty of conspiracy and obstruction. Several board members resigned. The foundation was stripped, restructured, and a memorial was commissioned with the names of all the patients lost to the cover dash. Amelia didn't attend the press conference. She and Austin were already gone. A year later, Countryside Clinic, the sign was handmade. It's a Ray Center. It wasn't. Large. Just 3 rooms, 2 nurses, a single operating table, and a community garden in the back. Amelia stepped outside in scrubs, wiping sweat from her brow. She waved to a young girl carrying books. Greeted an old man delivering eggs. Austin leaned against the porch. Holding 2 cups of coffee, she joined him. And they sat on the steps together. This isn't flashy, she murmured. No, he said, but it's real. A breeze passed, through the trees, rustling leaves, and carrying the scent of lavender. And for the first time in years, Amelia Ray Wexler felt ... free. 3 years later, Spring the Ray Center had grown. It now stood with 7 rooms. Solar panels glinting on the roof and a mural painted on the east wall. Sunflowers rising out of cracked earth, with a single word beneath them. Hope Amelia. Stood by the garden fence, a toddler strapped to her back, cooing softly as she inspected the growing herbs. A woman from the village waved as she passed. Dr. Ray, the shipment from Eldridge just arrived. Thank you, Nana. She called back. Austin's in the back, he'll help you unload. The child on her back giggled, then tugged gently. At her braid, Amelia turned her head and smiled. Hungry again? It's just like your father. The little boyno looked at her with his father's amber eyes. Already curious about everything inside, Austin was at the table, sorting patient files and laughing with 2 new interns. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked up as she entered and gave that easy, crooked smile that still disarmed her. You're late, he teased. I brought backup. She turned so Noah was facing him. The real boss has arrived. He kissed her cheek, then lifted the baby into his arms, bouncing him gently. Amelia leaned against the doorframe for a moment, watching them. There had been pain, battles, scars, loss, but there had also been this quiet, defiant joy in the aftermath. Life built slowly, honestly. Together later that evening, after Noah slept, they sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, warm tea in their hands. The stars stretched endlessly above them. Fireflies danced in the tall grass. I never thought peace would feel so. She searched for the word ordinary. Stan offered. She laughed softly. Yes. He reached for her hand and kissed it. We earned ordinary. A breeze passed. The scent of mint and wood smoke drifted, and in that moment beneath the stars, beside the man she chose in a life she built with open hands, Amelia smiled. Not for a camera, not for appearance, but because she was home the next morning. Before sunrise, Amelia stirred before the light broke across the hills. She lay still for a moment, her body curved into Austin's. Noah softly breathing in the crib beside them. The silence was sacred, but today her chest held a strange tightness. She sat up quietly, walking barefoot out to the porch. Dew clung to the grass, and fog hovered low over the field. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bird began its morning call. She pulled her shawl tighter and looked toward the horizon. A letter had arrived the day before from the city, not from Gregory. He would never write again, but from the foundation's new director, someone she'd helped appoint during the inquiry. They wanted her to return, not permanently, the letter said. It's just a keynote address. One night on the future of ethical care. Amelia held the paper in her hands now. Read the words again. She hadn't stepped foot back into that world since the trial, not even for interviews. Her name had floated in articles, quoted in books. But she had chosen silence over spectacle. This would change that. She didn't know if she was ready. Later. In the kitchen, Austin was flipping pancakes, one-handed, while Noah squealed with joy from his high chair, clapping with every flip. Amelia entered quietly and laid the letter on the counter. He glanced at it, then at her. They want you to speak. She nodded. He said nothing for a moment. Then what do you want? She hesitated. I don't know. I thought I buried that. Life. You buried the lies, he said. Not your voice. That hit deep. She looked at him, eyes wide and unsure. I'll go with you, he added softly. If you decide to go. Noah banged his spoon on the tray. Austin handed him a blueberry and turned back to the stove. I don't want to wear heels again, Amelia said after a long pause. Austin grinned. Then don't. 1 week later, City Auditorium, the room was full. Cameras again. Lights. Applause. But Amelia didn't flinch. She wore soft linen pants and her hair in a braid. No makeup, no armor, just presence. She stepped up to the podium, fingers resting lightly on the wooden edge. 3 years ago, she began. I stood in a courtroom and told the truth about the institution that raised me. That destroyed others. That nearly silenced me a beat. I thought I was done speaking. But healing isn't a closed chapter. It's a garden. And sometimes we are called to return, not to stay, but to plant seeds for others. Eyes locked on her, some welling with tears. I'm not here to save anything. I'm here to remember, to remind, and to rebuild differently. Applause. Not thunderous, but steady. Deep, respectful. Backstage afterward, Austin waited with Noah asleep in his arms, little shoes dangling. Amelia walked toward them slowly, her chest lifted with breath. Her eyes wet but calm. Austin smiled. You're not done, are you? She shook her head, but this time she said, reaching for her son, I speak on my own terms. That night, back in Silver Creek, Crane tapped gently against the roof. Austin stood by the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, staring into the night beyond the window. Amelia watched him from the doorway, the way his jaw tensed, not in anger, but in memory. You okay? She asked softly. He turned, startled, then nodded. Yeah, just ... The city always brings it back. She stepped in slowly. Your father. Austin nodded again, slower this time. I saw someone at the auditorium, one of his old assistants. He looked at me like I still belonged to that name. You don't, Amelia said firmly. I know. But sometimes I still feel like I'm paying off a debt I didn't ask for. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You've broke the chain, Austin. Not everyone has the courage to do that. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. I still remember the night I walked out. The way he looked at me like I'd stabbed him in the back. You didn't, she whispered. You saved your soul. Flashback 5 years ago. Stan's hands trembled as he set the files down on his father's desk. Gregory Wexler glanced at them, then slowly looked up. What is this? Proof, Austin said, of what you did, what you covered up. Gregory rose from his chair like a storm cloud forming. You ungrateful, I'm not a child anymore, Austin said, voice cracking but strong. I believed in you, till I realized what your empire was built on. If you think the world cares about your ideals, about purity, they'll destroy you before they thank you. Then let them. Gregory's eyes were ice. If you walk out that door, you're not my son. Austin turned the knob. Then I hope one day you learn what it means to be a father. Present, back in Silver Creek, Austin stood beside Noah's crib, watching his son sleep peacefully. One chubby hand curled around a stuffed bear. Amelia came up behind him and rested her head on his shoulder. He has your strength, she said. No, Austin replied. He has ours. He took a long breath, the air of old ghosts finally leaving his lungs. I think I want to write something, he added quietly. She looked up. About your father. About being a father. About what that means. What? It should mean, Amelia smiled. Write it? The world needs voices like yours. He nodded, then bent to kiss Noah's forehead. A boy born free of legacy, loved without condition, and a man finally learning that walking away from darkness was the first step toward becoming light. 2 months later, local forum in Eldridge. The auditorium was small. It's tucked behind the public library, but the seats were full. Austin stood at the podium, papers in hand, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something gentler. Purpose. He looked out at the faces young men, older women, fathers with their sons, a few doctors from the community. My name is Austin Wexler, he began. But I left that name behind when I chose the kind of man I wanted to become. He glanced down briefly, then up again. I didn't grow up with a healthy model of love or fatherhood. I learned silence, discipline, reputation, but not how to say I'm proud of you, not how to show up with grace or ask for forgiveness. A pause. Years ago, I walked away. I left wealth, privilege, and power behind. I went searching for something quieter, harder, something real. He smiled softly, his voice steady now, and I found it. In a town where people grow their food, with their hands, where healing takes time. Where a woman taught me that home isn't a place, it's a choice. And fatherhood isn't about perfection, it's about presence. The room was still. Then, slowly, applause rose. Austin exhaled. It wasn't about the clapping. It was about speaking the truth aloud and free. That night back in Silver Creek, Amelia found the letter in their mailbox just after sunset. It was unmarked, sealed in plain brown paper, with her name written in ink she hadn't seen in years. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she stood there beneath the evening sky, fingers trembling. The sounds of crickets around her. Austin came out moments later, holding Noah. You okay? She looked up, startled. Yeah, She showed him the letter. He read her face before the envelope. From someone you knew. She nodded slowly. From someone I used to be. Austin waited, then gently said, You don't have to open it alone. She looked down at the envelope again, and back at him. Tomorrow, she said. The next morning, a bench outside the clinic, the sun filtered through the trees, casting soft golden light over the bench where Amelia sat. The letter finally opened in her lap. Austin stood nearby, giving her space. She read the words again. Mia, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want to tell you I'm sorry for what I didn't. For what I let happen, I was a coward. But I never stopped wondering about you. I heard you found love, a son, a life. I'm glad. If you ever want to meet just once, I'll be at St. Teresa's on the 10th. I'll wait until sundown. Mother? The bench held her stillness. Amelia didn't cry, but something inside her long buried shifted, and she whispered aloud. Not to the wind, not to Austin, but to herself. Maybe it's time. To be continued.